Now, we left off talking about Ang working in Italy and his interest in classical art on one hand, uh, and also in Renaissance art. And there were a couple of reasons for this, and one of them is that he was on the Prix de Rome from the Royal Academy, and part of that was I found out from Occam's article that he had to submit a portfolio of his work from the time, and she mentioned it was a mandatory portfolio in that article, right? So one of the things he's doing with some of the works that he's assembling is that demonstrating the benefit he's deriving from the trip, right? What is beneficial from it. And it's sort of like a reflective paper you have to do right at the end of a class or something like that. So, why should we be happy to have sent you? So this interest in Raphael, this interest in Titian, this interest in classical sculpture, that the works that he starts to send home, like Oedipus and the Sphinx, or that bather that was talked about in the Occam article, are all part of demonstrating the fact that he's profiting from the trip and not just goofing off, right? Now, as he's down there, he's immersing himself in these different works. The other reason I think for this is that he'd been criticized for being too Gothic, especially with his Napoleon on the imperial throne that looked like Van Eyck, or part of a Van Eyck, and because of that, he I think he's trying to demonstrate the fact that he isn't all that Gothic, by turning to these things. So he's really trying to prove a point, and I think in a certain level what we're going to see is that this will define a lot of the rest of his career, is this idea of trying to show people that he's not this, but he's that, And that famous quote that I made a mention of, but I don't seem to have in today's notes, which is that he sees himself as a conservator of good taste, not as an innovator. And in fact, that's what we'll see as we look at the rest of Ang's work today. Where is my thingamajig? I guess I can just do that. Ang painted images from the life of Raphael on a great number of occasions. Here we see Raphael and the Fornarina in the studio canoodling, right? I love this picture because it's the same legend, right? Remember that Raphael painted, according to legend, painted Cardinal Bibbiena, and then Bibbiena asked him to paint his daughter, and he fell in love with the daughter, and he painted her nude after having painted her clothed. And this one on the right, taking a little break from their work, and he's has been painting her, and we see right over here, there's the recognizable clothed Fornarina, right, the proper one. But I like the fact that he's sitting on his lap, and he's looking at the picture going, what about a naked one? Right? And I think I could paint a second version of this now that I know what she feels like. Anyway, there's something that's coyly erotic about it, and I think one of the things that Occam mentions as a bit of a sidelight is the degree to which Ang's personality lends itself to these images just before Eros takes over, just before lust really comes home to roost, right? And that's the case here. Well, he's not only multiple versions throughout his entire career. He really ends up sitting on these ideas throughout. So he starts to paint them when he's there. He repaints them all the way to the end of his career. So here's a second version of Raphael with the Fornarina on his lap, and here's a late version, 3 years before his death, where he's revisiting the idea of Bibiena offering his needs to Raphael. So he really becomes sort of stuck in these in these idioms that he has here. He's not only interested in Raphael while he's in Rome, he's also quite interested in Titian. Almost every painter who goes to Rome gets interested in Titian, I think, or at least to Italy as an outsider, because he's the painter's painter. So you know the Venus of Urbino from intro, but it's also in your textbook because numerous artists of the 19th century will turn to it for inspiration. Ang is one of them, has made this really quite exacting copy of it. That's up in the Walters Art Museum. So he has sort of local works of art that attest to the fact that it is. And in fact, he's not trying to fool anybody. It says here, Ang painted it after Titian, right in the foreground, right? So he's copying Titian's too. And this is what then leads us to the painting for your reading for today, which is the Grand Odalisque, which is obviously a variation on this theme. Notice the number of things that are similar in this. The placement of the body, even though her posture has turned. The use of a drawn curtain, which this is a bad reproduction on the right, but that's a curtain behind her shoulders. But he's manipulated it, right? It's his version of this, or a revision of the composition, so that he's put the curtain at her feet as opposed to behind her shoulders. The bunched up white cloth bedspread over the pad that reveals part of the pad underneath it. This can't be coincidence. The pillow's bunched under her elbow. Instead of flowers, she picks up a feather fan, right? Making it somewhat exotic and Eastern for fanning oneself when it's hot. Instead of the puppy dog, the soft little furry puppy dog, we see she's laying on a fur pelt as well. So these things just keep getting picked up. And instead of the two figures in the background who appear to be probably taking her clothes or getting her clothes, she is after all a prostitute, it's not Venus. We have in this one a hookah pipe down at her feet, right? So he's taken a lot of these different elements, just kind of moved them around a little bit, put them here or there, and come up with his new version of it, right? And from the reading, we know now that it was a pendant to a separate work that has since been lost, right? Originally, sorry, let's go back. Well, I'm trying to go back, but it's not working. There we go. Originally, he had painted a work for Jochen Marat, that showed a reclining nude woman that was lost in 1815. Everybody would like to think that someday it will be found, but as Napoleon was overthrown, it was lost. And when Napoleonic people left Italy behind, this is a later copy that's in London, later variation on the same composition. You'll notice the hair coming out from behind her arm, incredibly eroticized, flowing hair down, and that swoon that she's in can be interpreted as, almost, alcohol or sex related. Is the post-coital glow, I guess, for lack of a better word. And when he described it in a letter, he said that her arm was originally kind of like this, over the back of her head, right, as you see. And this is a drawing by Ang from a letter where he's describing what the work looked like, right? It was like this. And so you'll see that it's very similar to this one in that her hips are toward us, her breasts lay back, her face is in profile, one arm forward, the other arm back, but the placement of the arms was somewhat different, right? And the reason I bring this up is it's not really discussed in the reading, but that makes her very close to a classical statue, a very, very famous one of the most famous classical statues from the Hellenistic period of Ariadne asleep. Ariadne was the daughter of, I don't ever do classical mythology, so I gotta get this, I have to pause before I blast through this, right? She was the daughter of King Minos of Crete, who kept that minotaur in the labyrinth. And she was one that helped Perseus figure out how to get inside the maze, kill the minotaur, get back out again by giving him string that he could unfurl behind him so he could find his way back out after he's battled the minotaur. That was always a double whammy of a proposition, right? Kill the man bull, difficult in itself, and then get the heck out of the maze because no one knew how to do it. Ariadne said, here, Perseus, take this. Or Theseus, sorry, take the string, and you can then find your way back out. So he does, he takes her with him, right? And goes back to Athens to be all happy, but at the same time he took her little sister, falls in love with the little sister, and dumps Ariadne on some island, right, on the way back to say, hey baby, what have you done for me lately? Get out of here, right? And it ended up being the island where Dionysus, the god of wine, lived. And so the images of the sleeping Ariadne is where she's sleeping one off because she's now living on the island of wine, right? The island where Dionysus lives. And she becomes the consort of Dionysus, right? The Greek god of wine. So, taking all of that into consideration, and the idea that we learn from Aachen that there's a sensual side to these images, right? This adds to it, this reference point, as well as fitting into what Aang is supposed to be doing when he's in Rome, which is immersing himself in classical culture, right? Immersing himself in works of art that were supposed to be studied at this time. Okay, so these are a little background for these works, for the Grand Odalisque. And then finally, as we learned, right, it was Joachim Murat, the king of Naples, the brother-in-law, sorry about the I, the typo there, I didn't see that on my computer. Joachim Murat, the king of Naples, who was the brother-in-law of Napoleon, and had been instituted as the king of Naples by Napoleon when Napoleon was crowned emperor, 1804, right? Puts his family into all of these positions so that the empire will stay within the family, right? So his sister's husband, his youngest sister's husband, becomes the king of Naples, commissions this work from Aang shortly after he gets down there in 1806, right? Buys it in 1809, okay? And as we learn, 6 years later, his wife, Caroline, the sister of Napoleon, commissions the Grand Odalisque, apparently as a pendant. Pendant means hang together, right? Think of like a neck pendant, right? So they're meant to hang side by side, pendants, right? They're meant to go together. And I'm leaving the color one in simply because we don't know the color of the other one or exactly what it is, but this is an Aang after all. And you can see that they mirror each other in certain ways. Yeah? Even as Aang describes it, like the toe-to-toe, right? They're just not exact mirrors, but similar mirrors, right? One faces us, one faces away, right? One is just a sleeping woman. The other one takes that theme a bit further toward this oriental woman, this harem girl. That's what odalisque means, is harem girl. And we have these elements that stick it into the Middle East, if you will. The exotic silk fabric, the hookah pipe, the fan feather with the jewels, her turban, right, her headwear. All of these things push her into being a harem woman, which we'll talk more about. But you can see it's designed as a sort of, I think Occam says, an answer, if you will, an artistic response to the earlier work, right? So let's use that as a touching a starting point here, And let's talk about the Occam article. I think that I'm not going to record this part of it because it seems like just a discussion like this, you'll just hear the things I say and not the things that you guys are saying, because I don't know how far this reaches. So rather than edit this at home, I'm going to pause it for a second and we'll pick it up in just a bit. Right. One of the things that Occam says is that the Odalisque was a response to this work. That was part of these works that Ang was required to send back to Rome, back to Paris while on the Rome trip. And again, I have this idea that he's trying to prove himself as a neoclassicist. Right? He's trying to show people that he really knows what he's doing this way. Let's see. At the same time, it's obviously based on studying Italian examples. As we saw, it looks very much like that Titian. But he changes things for sensuousness. And so Occam talked about how her face seems relatively boneless. Can you see that now? There's sort of no zygomatic arch to set the eye socket off. And it ends up looking not ugly, but like a porcelain doll or something. You know, there's something Barbie-like about her. Even though she also kind of reminds me of the girl with the pearl earring, even though I don't think that Ang knows that picture, right? But the pearls in her hair, and notice the sort of exoticized hairdo. And again, these details I think will show us this, that Ang has never given up on the Van Eyck realism that he did early on, that he's always doing that with his works. They're equally detailed as they are classicizing at the same time. Let's see what else we got. These secondary details. There's the hookah pipe spitting smoke now, you can see. And those lotus flowers that are on the curtain, certainly referencing Egyptian art, right? Lotus was one of the primary motifs in Egyptian art. And Napoleon, after all, had conquered Egypt. So that brought this interest in all things Middle Eastern, really began to bring it to France. And her jeweled feather fan, her gold bracelets, this hookah pipe on the right, that jewel that you can see just off her hip there, and her hair, the turban, are all meant to sort of lift her out of France and put her into North Africa, right? And most likely, we'll see France is going to have their hands pretty muddy in North Africa, in particular in Algeria, where they will colonize all the way till the 1960s, all the way till my lifetime. When Napoleon fell from power in 1814, Caroline Murat and Jochen were deposed, and Ang was able to get the Grand Bather back. She's huge, by the way. She's almost life-size. Right? She's a very big picture. He gets it back, and he exhibits it in the 1819 Salon. Right? And this is where I think you could do a better job reading your text than listening to me, because she's got a nice section on the negative reception of this work, how badly criticized it was in 1819 when Ang put it in the Salon. Most of it was subject matter, and this only reiterates what Occam was saying about the privacy of sensuality, right? Especially for women. But really, it's not just for women. It was really unprecedented in French art to depict a nude without a narrative context. In other words, Venus is all well and good because she's Venus. It's got a narrative context, right? Diana, the huntress, who's found bathing by Adonis. No, wait, Diana and Endymion finds her bathing and sees her naked, and she gets mad and turns him into a dog or a deer, and he's killed by his own hunting dogs, right? Those are fine because it's got a context that separates it from here and now. Okay? This, however, doesn't. And that makes it dangerous. That makes it transgressive. Makes it difficult. And a lot of the ire that was blasted at it had to do with the fact that it was it was a contemporary image without. It's a woman in her private area. That's it, right? It's not Diana at the bath. It's not Venus and Cupid, right? And that makes it really dangerous because it's so contemporary. You might argue that Titian's was also this way. Remember, it's not really Venus. It's a prostitute, actually, this image is. So why didn't, and it's hanging in Paris. So why are they pissed off about that? You know, if they're saying, oh, you can't do this, well, why could Titian do that then? And the answer is not so easy, but two things. One, that's why they called it Venus, gave it safety. Titian's also 300 years old. That gives it a little bit of safety too, right? Because it's old, you know, like, do you know the photographer Robert Mapplethorpe did gay-themed images in the 80s. He died of AIDS as well. He was best friends with Patti Smith, the punk rocker. And she wrote a book, which you all should read, won the National Book Award, called Just Friends, about growing up with Robert Mapplethorpe, being 20 years old, and an artist in New York. And it's just terrific, absolutely. And it's tiny, beats written a day. So good. Anyway, he did a series of photographs that were rather difficult to look at, that were sort of modern versions of ancient Greek sculptures. And as languid and erotic as any Greek sculpture might be, as unabashed in their nakedness, but because they were contemporary people, it was just like, you know, people really reacted to them, right? That distance, you know, if you were to see, you know the famous Barberini faun? He's laying back like this, and he's naked, and he's like, if you saw him on the subway, right? But if you see him in a sculpture, even though it's over life size, and probably a lot better looking than anybody you'd see on the subway like that, right? He's safe, right? And so the Titian is safe because of the distance of time, or the distance of culture. Ingres remained okay only so long as it remained a private commission. When he puts it in the salon, he cracks that open wide, right? And it becomes transgressive work, right? This is an interesting aspect for Ingres' work because he's going to continue to do bathers for the rest of his career. We've got this one, 12 years later, very close to the 1808 one. This is at the Phillips, and it's pretty small. It's about like that. But you'll notice that she has the same headdress that she has here on the left, right? She has the same body that she has there and that she has in that 1808 bather. Do I have that coming up? Where's the 1808 bather? Yeah, there we are. Right, she has the same body as this one, same winding. But you'll notice, well, what has he added to it? People, right? Lots of them. Are there any men there? I don't see any, right? Got two women laying on the shore. You got a woman bathing, a young girl. There's your 10-year-old, right? In the river there, and you've got this sleeping woman on the right. So in many ways, this one takes the theme here, which is also another harem girl. Notice the curtain pulled back. There's a little fountain just by her ankles there. You can see it spitting water, lower left corner, right? And that blue and white is meant to sort of be quasi-Middle Eastern, right? He's removed it and put her in nature. And I think on a certain level, what he's doing with some of these is suggesting that you become sort of like that poor hunter who chanced on Diana at the bath. Or perhaps like King David spying Bathsheba at the bath. That he's almost like he's trying to give it some more narrative context in order to dilute the degree to which it is a difficult image, right? Susanna and the elder, she was bathing when the elders saw her, right? And maybe it's engaging you in that particular way, right? What do I have next? We're almost out of time, I know. This one's in the Walters. I think we'll start with this next time because you can see she's really based on the odalisque, but seen from the other side, or from that original image of the woman with her arm over her head, right? That originally had been done for Marat that he couldn't get back. And he's got a couple different versions of this. So we'll start with that. I don't have much more on Ingres. And then we're going to move to Britain. I don't think we'll spend as much time with British and American neoclassicism, except for those things that we have in the National Gallery that I think are worth talking about. I was going to ask you guys if you really wanted to do American art, but then I realized that some of you are doing American art topics, so I think we should continue to do that. So I will see you on Friday to talk about a little bit of Ang and a lot of Britain and America, right? And also the crowdsourcing thing.